Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hopanwo TV. Well, if you watch this channel regularly, and especially my series of videos entitled Ufo Disclosure 2015, then you will know that I've been talking an awful lot about speaking at Probe. Now, by that I refer to the UK Probe International Conference at Lytham St Anne's, Lancashire. Now, again, if you watch this channel regularly, you'll have seen the videos I make from that area, from that conference. You'll know this is a conference that has a special place in my heart. I mean, I was absolutely delighted to speak there, and I did. I spoke there on the 10th and the 11th of October. Well, the 11th of October specifically, I was the second speaker on a Sunday, and I had a wonderful time. I stayed at the Langdale's Hotel, the Speaker's Hotel. I met all kinds of people, like all my regular Probe buddies, and the other speakers, like there was Joanne Richards, there was Dex Dobie, Brian Halliwell, Miles Johnston. Oh yeah, you can't get away from that guy. And a lot of other friends were there, and I absolutely adored it. And what you're going to see in a minute is a recording of that lecture. Now, as far as I know, that's the only recording ever made of my lecture at the Probe. I did say if anyone else wanted to film me, they could, and some people did have their mobile phones out, but as far as I know, their contributions have not been published. This is audio only, I'm afraid. That's because because I was using my camcorder. But I used a number of slides, and you will see the slides that I've been using in this video that you're about to see. You'll see basically whenever I say next slide, please. When I was there on stage, someone else was operating the slides with a laptop, and so I just call out next slide, please, and the next slide appeared on the screen. What you're going to be seeing is you're going to be seeing the slide in front of you in the video, basically you'll be seeing what the people were seeing on the screen, if you know what I mean. There's a couple of occasions there's one occasion actually where I changed the slides at a different time in this video recording to the one sorry, not video recording, an illustrated audio recording, to the time when I actually say next slide please on the actual film, and that's because I basically I made a mistake while I was there. I'm sorry about that. Now, you might have to study these slides carefully, because when I was there, you see, I had a laser pointer and I was pointing at various things. I was going, like that, Doctor Who style. But of course, I can't do that on this particular recording. So you'll just have to look very carefully at the slides, and you'll see the kind of things I'm talking about. For instance, the slide of Thieves Wood, you'll see the square-shaped clearing at the bottom left. Okay, so that's what you've got to look out for. So I'm sorry there was no video recording. It means you can't see me, unfortunately. You can't see my gorgeous, handsome face. But so you're just going to have to listen to my beautiful timbered voice with illustrations. I hope that will do for you. It may be an advantage, you never know. Depends what you think of me. Now, this is coming at a time, actually, it's quite sort of provident, because I've got to be speaker at Probe finally. I've wanted to be the speaker at the Probe for many years, and Sam offered to put me on, but he never managed to find a slot with me for me until now. But it's actually quite it's quite fortuitous, it's quite fateful really, because you see, Probe is changing. It's not. I said before that Probe might be coming to an end. It's not coming to an end, but it's changing. It's going to change out of all recognition, and that's sad. Because I mean, as you know, I'm a big one for the conference circuits. I go to all the conferences like time and money allows, and I've been to a lot more this year than I normally would have, because basically I've either been speaking or I've been given press passes, and people in the local area have given me a place to stay, or lifts. I mean, in case Colin Wolfe had given me a lift and things like that. If it wasn't for those guys, I wouldn't have been able to go to half the conferences I have this year just gone, and so I'm grateful for them. I'm very grateful indeed. Probe has a special place in my heart. It always has. Since I first attended in 2006, I went to the October-autumn 2006 Probe, because Probe is twice yearly. It appears in the spring and autumn, and since then as I explained at the beginning of my lecture, it's become a very important part of my life. I've gone to all the ones that I can. I've had to miss a few, which is a shame, but I go to all the ones that I can. this series of events is coming to an end, and it's a great shame. Probe has been running since 1990. It's one of the oldest UFO conspiracy paranormal conferences in the country. It is the architect of Gene and Sam Wright, who I interviewed in one of my videos, if you remember. A couple of years ago I did an interview with the two of them and spoke to them. But the thing is, then they were not young people, even at the time. They were retired, and of course they got older, and in 2011 Gene tragically died. Sam took over the running on his own with his son Paul, and a couple of other local people like Dex helped out. But of course that situation cannot go on forever, and I know that inevitably change will have to come, and now change has come. What's happened is the Wright family, Sam's son, is still very much closely involved, and he's like chief executive officer of the franchise, and Sam is also going to be involved, although Sam is now pretty elderly now. He's still going to be involved. He's still going to be chief executive officer along with Paul. But the actual Probe franchise has been licensed to an organisational business team that is going to transform it. They're going to change the entire Probe experience out of all recognition. Now, I've written an article about this, which will be in the description. There's a link in the description box to that, and it gives you the details of what's happening. But basically, the first of the new Probe conferences is going to begin in October 2016. That's next year, at the time that this video is going to YouTube. It's going to start on, it's Friday the 14th of October to Sunday the 16th, so it's a big 3-day event, and it's going to include a film festival, a special relaunch celebration, and an exclusive evening presentation by none other than Erich von Daniken, the Swiss maverick archaeologist who he's written a lot of books about the ancient alien theory, and he's written books like Chariots of the Gods, Remnants of the Gods. He's written about 20 books. And I've read Chariots of the Gods, actually. The venue was also moving. It's moving from Lytham St Anne's to Blackpool. It's going to the north shore of Blackpool and to the luxury Norbreck Castle Hotel. Now this is a splendid building. It's a 19th century hotel with 480 rooms. It's got a beach in front of it. It's got a golf course at the back. It's the sort of place the Bilderberg group would meet. We got in there before them this year. There's talk of live streaming the proceedings on the net. There's going to be a demonstration by a guy called Michael Otaski. Now he's a speed painter, and that sounds like what it means. That means basically what it sounds. Sounds like he paints very fast. What he does is he just stands in front of this canvas on stage, which is always very, very big. It's about as big as, it's about 7 feet tall, this canvas, and 7 feet wide. And a guy called Howard Wilkin will play music. He's a musician, and Michael Ostaski will paint a picture, and he does all sorts of pictures. He does portraits of Michael Jackson and various film stars. He does portraits of Bob Marley and Julia Roberts, and he's done I think he's done Tina Turner. He's done several people. Now the new management team includes, I mean, I don't know a lot of them. They're all new to me, a lot of them. But one of them is Vitaly Safarov. Now he is somebody I know. He's an ET contact experiencer. He comes from Israel, and he's spoken at Probe a couple of times. He spoke at Probe Conference 2009. And there are several other people. A lot of the people who are involved with Dolores Cannon's company, the Ozark Mountain Press, they're going to be involved. And Steve Mera's Phenomena magazine is going to be one of the sponsors. There's a contingent from China. There's several from other countries. Lots of Americans are going to be involved in running it. And at the last Probe where I was speaking, I mean, this was actually the Sunday morning before I came on stage, but Vitaly did a special announcement. And basically, on November the 1st, a new website was launched, and it's called Probe UFO, www.probeufoparanormal.com. The Probe, what it basically is happening is the Probe conferences are moving up market. That's what that's the basis about it. it's going to be in this. They're basically the probe conferences are going to be moved into the same league in terms of sophistication as, say, the International UFO Congress, that's in Laughlin, Nevada, the annual Nexus conferences, things like that. It's going to be in that kind of level. And I must say, listening to Vitaly speak and watching their videos, they've got promotional videos on YouTube which you can watch. And of course, if you go to the link in the description box where I talk about New Probe, you'll see all this information will be there for you, which I've written in my article. It looks very impressive. I look forward to experiencing it. Vitaly was very persuasive, actually, what he spoke about, and I would like to go. I would like to go if I can. But I'm going to miss what we have now with Probe. Okay, it's not the little drafty. A drafty basketball court at the YMCA Centre in Lytham St Anne's with fold-away plastic chairs. It's a far cry from the mighty Norbreck Castle Hotel with its sauna and its gym and its swimming pool and its golf courses and its casino and the Nork Olympia Conference Centre. That's it. These guys are going to hire the big ballroom where you can get 1,500 people into it. Oh yeah. But you know, what we had with Probe has a sweet charm all of its own. And that's something that's very often underrated. That kind of thing is very much underrated in our society, I think. Alright, it was something like to bring cushions to sit on. It was cold, it was drafty, it was, you know, you have to go out and get the coffee from the machine or nip out to the pub at lunchtime. Yeah, I know. But, you know, I'm going to miss that. Now, I know Sam can't carry on organising the conference forever. The Variety family can't do that forever. I know that. Change is going to be inevitable. And I wish New Probe all the best. I hope they can deliver what they say they can deliver. I mean, they want events that are educational, enjoyable and inspirational. That's what they say. This is them. I'll actually read their mission statement. They wish to educate and entertain audiences in the field of ufology, the paranormal and spirituality, and to offer a new generation of speakers and researchers a public platform where transformational media such as lectures, consciousness films and documentaries, arts, fashion and courses can be showcased to a global audience. It is hoped that we can expand our horizons in the field to encourage a greater understanding of our world, and that we can engage with the greater community around the globe to facilitate the broadest information platform in collaboration with organisations alike. Well, that sounds great. Good luck to them. I really wish them all the best. It sounds very impressive. Now, tickets is an issue, of course, here is that although tickets are not on sale yet, so I can't tell you how much they cost. The website, you know, it's inescapable. They're going to be more expensive than what we had before. The 38 quid for the whole weekend, that's out the window now. That's inevitable. It's inescapable because this isn't, as I said, it's moving up market. It's more sophisticated. New Probe is going to be more expensive than old Probe. Probably significantly so. And I do wonder how many of the current delegates have a budget that can accommodate however much it's going to cost. And I include myself in that, because I'm not a rich man. I fear for the future of the Probe community as it is, which has become like a second family to me. I mean, the organisers of the conference, they want to preserve the legacy of Gene and Sam Wright. That's what they've said. You know, and that includes, the legacy includes this close-knit camaraderie that we have. But how realistic is that? We're going to have to wait and see. But in the meantime, right, the good news is the last ever Old Probe conference, that is the Probe conference in its current format, its original format, is going to take place in April. The old website is still up. It is www.ukprobe.com, so that's different from the other website. And it is. Yeah, and you can get all the details of the April conference is going to be there. I don't think I'm speaking this time. If they ask me to speak, I will. But I don't think I'm speaking. I think they're organising other speakers right now. Now, but the details are not up yet, but they will be published shortly. But please do, I strongly recommend, please do come to that event if you can, because it is your last chance ever to experience the Probe conferences in their original format. After that, it's gone, and it's gone forever. Oh, I mean, well, the only preservation will basically be people like me who've made films and written articles about it. It'll exist in memory, and it'll exist in the electronic medium, thanks to people like me. And that is sad, but as the Buddhists say, everything is transient. You have to accept the transient nature of all things in this universe, and I try to see it that way. And I'm looking forward. I feel enthusiastic about New Probe. I think, from what Vitaly said, I think they really are determined. They've got some great ideas. They have a lot of skill and a lot of obviously a lot of business acumen too. And I really do hope they can do well. And I hope I can go in October. If so, you'll hear about it on Panwo TV. I'll do a little reportage for you, like I always do. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, here is my live recording at Probe, October 2015, the last ever, so the second last Probe. The last one's in April, coming up, as I said. This is the second last ever Probe in its original format. And I do hope you enjoy it. So, see you at the other end, as Niall Murphy says on Shamanic Freedom Radio. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order. That was lovely. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, is Nick Pope here? No? Oh dear. No, I thought he might put in an appearance. No. Now he's got married, actually, Nick Pope. Him and his fiancée Elizabeth, they tied the knot at the UFO Congress a couple of years ago. Didn't go very well at first. The ceremony was a bit of a shambles because they were both standing in front of the vicar, and the vicar says, "Nicholas, do you take this woman Elizabeth to be your lawful wedded wife, to love and cherish from this day forward till death do you part," etc. Nick replied, "I can neither confirm nor deny that." Okay, that's enough Nick Popery for one day. I'm not a Nick Papist. My name is Ben Emlyn-Jones, and this is my website, a panel, HPANWO, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. And if you want to know anything more about me, thank you. You can Google that or check it out. The main website has articles. There's also a portal to the news site, the YouTube channel, the radio shows I present, the fictional blog, the forum. It's very much a multimedia experience, but the subjects it covers are pretty much what you've been hearing about at this conference and what this conference covers, so pretty much in line with that. Now, I've been attending these conferences as a delegate now since 2006. I've been to most of them since that time. I first attended October 2006, almost exactly 9 years ago, and I had no idea what I was getting involved with. I turned up, I didn't know anybody. I'd simply read I used to get Dave Starbuck's newsletter, and it was advertised in there. But at the end of the weekend, I was hooked. I'd found a family, I found friends, and I was now a part of a community which I feel very, very strong about. And this conference has a special place in my heart, it really does. And I look forward very much to what Vitaly was saying yesterday about the new probe, the International Probe UFO and Paranormal Conference. I know it's going to be very different to this one. I'm sure it looks very impressive, what he's got planned. I look forward to experiencing it. But I will miss what we have now. I think the format of the conference we have now has a charm, it has a vitality, and I will miss that, and I will regret that it's no longer there. So, but I'll keep coming, I'll keep visiting. Now, the subject I'm going to talk about today, can I have the next slide up, please? Thanks very much. Thanks very much. I'm going to talk to you about the strange case of the Nottinghamshire Roswell. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term Roswell. It is, of course, refers to the Roswell Incident of July of 1947, where some kind of object from another world came to grief on the Earth's surface and was secretly salvaged by the government. The government then covered it up. They came up with all kinds of ridiculous excuses for what really happened. It was weather balloons, it was Project Mogul balloons, it was parachute test dummies, and etc., etc. I think the government must think that we are parachute test dummies. They really must, if we believe that sort of thing. And of course, this is a poise they maintain to this day in the face of all reason and common sense. But the Roswell Incident of 1947 is not the only one of its kind. What we're talking about here is a distinct part of ufology. I think there's a distinct discipline within ufology here, the Roswell. You hear other things such as the Welsh Roswell, the Brazilian Roswell, etc., etc. And it's only a matter of time before the Oxford English Dictionary includes the words Roswell as a common noun within its pages to refer to this kind of event. There's been others. There was one in 1940 here in England at Gateshead. There's supposedly one in 1945 at Cape Girardeau, Missouri, USA. There's several other examples both before and since. And in fact, there's a book by Ryan Wood in which it lists over 100 different examples within the last century of this sort of thing happening. Now when these kinds of events happen, these Roswells happen, you find wherever they are in the world, the same thing happens. You get the army move in, the police move in, they seal everything off, they retrieve whatever physical evidence exists, and they cover it up. They put out a cover story, they harass witnesses, etc., etc. It's almost as if, in fact it is as if, some kind of global policy was in place for dealing with these phenomena which the governments of all sovereign states obey. That's a big subject, probably beyond the scope of this particular lecture. Now, what we're talking about here was known before as the Mansfield Incident. I called it the Nottinghamshire Roswell because I'm hoping that name will stick, because I think it deserves to be called that. The Mansfield Incident doesn't do it credit. Next slide, please. This is the kind of thing we're talking about, obviously. This is an image of the Roswell Incident. And this is the kind of thing we're talking about here. It's more than just lights in the sky, it was what we were previously told. On the next slide, please. Thanks. This is Nexus Volume 4, Number 6, which covers October to November 1997. So this actually came out 10 years after the event I'm going to talk about today. This is a bit of a kind of a recurring curse in ufology. An incident happens and you get a long period of time between the incident actually happening and research beginning. There are a few exceptions, like Rendlesham Forest is a good example. But generally it's decades, sometimes many decades, before somebody picks it up and research begins. Of course, with the Roswell Incident, it was 31 years between the event happening and 1978, when Jesse met Stan, and the rest is history. In the case of the Aurora incident, it was about 70 years before anyone actually started looking into it. So that is a recurring curse. It has to. This does happen, and I think it's up to us to avoid that by getting in there and investigating cases as soon as we can after they've happened. This particular case, as I said, it was 1987. It was actually Thursday, the 12th of November 1987. It took place at 1:30 a.m. This was a weekday night. Most people were in bed, and they were rocked out. They were basically disturbed from their sleep by a huge explosion. There was a huge aerial explosion that people understandably, at first mistook for thunder, which is understandable because the noise of large explosions, thunder is the first thing that comes into our head, because that
is what we expect to hear. As Jeff was talking about before I was on, it's about programming, it's about what we're used to and how we interpret events that come to us based on what we already know. This was no thunderclap though. The sky was clear, there was no rain, there was no cloud, it was actually beautiful weather. This explosion was much louder than any thunderclap, and there was a shockwave that went with it. It actually damaged several properties in the area. Numerous persons were affected by this. Numerous persons reported structural damage to their property, chimney pots falling off, broken windows, cracks in the wall, and things like that. This was not an ordinary meteorological phenomenon. And along with the shockwave, there was what looks like the effects of electromagnetic radiation, a very powerful electromagnetic pulse. We know that because, for instance, TV aerials were damaged, electric wiring was damaged, the power stations and substations rather and power lines were all badly damaged by this, which indicates that this was some kind of electromagnetic pulse. One of the principal witnesses to this event was actually an insurance broker, because his office was inundated by requests and claims because of the damage that was done to people's houses. A local TV repairman as well was rushed off his feet as people were bringing in their broken electronic equipment to be repaired because of the damage done to them by this electromagnetic pulse. It's actually a miracle no one was killed, but there are no reported fatalities from this event that I know of. Now, go to the next slide, please. Thanks. This is the area we're talking about where it was affected. This is a rough location of the area here. Could I have the sorry, I need the electronic pointer. Right. Yeah. This is this line I've drawn around here is a rough circle of the area affected. The explosion was heard much further away, but this is basically where shockwave effects can be observed. This is Western Nottinghamshire, particularly the Ashfield district. Now, this is an area which is known today as the Nottingham Conurbation. That term was not used in the 1980s, but it is today, and it refers to the city of Nottingham and the surrounding towns. Now, this is an area which is, it's kind of where the suburbs of Nottingham meet the countryside. It's not country and it's not town, it's kind of in between. It's like a checkerboard of large towns like Kirkby in Ashfield, Sutton in Ashfield, Blydydd, places like that. And in between those there are equally large spaces of greenery, forests, fields, farmers' fields, pasture, arable fields, things like that. There's a lot of main roads in the area. It's highly populated. In fact, there's 11,000 people live within this circle I've drawn on this map. Pardon? You live there. Who lives? Some people live. I know some people in this room who are from that area, and clearly some people I've spoken to. Now, some of the witnesses, some of them went outdoors when they heard this noise, and they reported seeing strange lights in the sky. Now, these lights, there was more than one of them. We know that for sure. They performed manoeuvres that you would not see an aircraft doing. They zigzag, loop-the-loop, things like that. These were not aircraft. These objects they travel roughly in this direction here, roughly from north-east to south-west, across Sherwood Forest, across Mansfield, and down here into the Ashfield district. There's Blydydd there, and there's Kirkby and Sutton in Ashfield over there. So this was basically the area affected of these objects. And witnesses report that these objects were descending. They described them as being like aircraft in trouble. They were having difficulty. They say things like, there was a whining sound, this craft was losing power. Now that could be interpreted as speculation, well, that's just what they think. They think they see it coming down, they think it's in trouble. But based on what I'm going to tell you next, I think there's more to it than that. I think it seems that there was some kind of malfunction with whatever these artefacts were. Now, at least one of these objects came to the ground. It struck the ground, it got back into the air, and then it struck the ground again where it came to rest. It actually landed or crashed. Some people report some kind of collision between the various objects, and some people have interpreted this as missiles being fired at these objects. We don't know that. It's probably not likely, but that's what the witnesses report. But the object actually descended into the Mist Hills, which is this area here. It's a famous beauty spot where poets and people like that used to live. And a lot of the Mist Hills is actually covered by the estate of Annesley Hall, and that was the final resting place for the object. So it's as if the object, it came down, it struck the ground, it's like it bounced, it struck the ground and then got back into the air. It flew on for a bit further, then came down again and stopped. So at the point where it bounced, it caused a forest fire. It actually came down in a forest, in the middle of a woods, and it caused a forest fire. Now, I'm up to date on my slides, I think I am, yeah. So I'm used to sort of like I usually do this myself. Now, where did this story come from? That's the question. Well, the original source of this document was someone who, well, he's not in the room today, but he has attended this conference, someone I've communicated with. His name's John King. He's not here today. But he received an email from someone called Ashley Rye, who talked a lot about this event. And this formed the original article, which was in John King's magazine, which was called Skywatch, which is now sadly no longer operating. But it was like a first-generation internet e-zine. And this is where the Nexus author Harry Mason got the source for his own document on that, which was published in Nexus magazine, which I just showed you. Now, what is reported by Ashley Rye in this email was that by 2:15 in the morning, that's just 45 minutes after the incident occurred, a number of military helicopters were seen in the area. They were flying slowly over the areas of Normanton, Sutton-in-Ashfield and Kirkby, shining lights at the ground, which of course police helicopters do all the time today, but they didn't do that in those days. Now, a source that I'm going to draw a lot on today, which I'll introduce you to in a minute, he said that these helicopters were deployed from RAF Coningsby and RAF, it's from two air bases. One of them shut down. I'll give you the details in a minute, but some of the helicopters were they were Chinooks, which are large troop-carrying transport aircraft. Very, very easily recognisable because they have double rotor blades, and these were seen in the area, shining lights at the ground. So they reacted very quickly to the presence of this object, and that's very important. That's an important point. The very fast response of the government authorities to the presence of this object, and I'll come back to that. Now, Harry Mason, in his Nexus article, puts this down to a weapons test, but I don't think it is, and it doesn't quite fit, and there's reasons for that. Could I have the next slide, please? Thanks very much. Now, the first thing I did, of course, was to try and look for media, so independent, mainstream media sources for this, to see if the local newspapers covered it. Now, I've reason to believe that BBC Radio covered this, but there's no record of that at present. But I do know that the local paper, this local paper here, the Nottingham Post, did cover it, and they actually did this article in 2010. Do aliens exist? And if so, have they visited Mansfield? This was in August of 2010. Either way, newly released government reports make an interesting read. The National Archives are releasing thousands of pages of previously classified Ministry of Defence documents today relating to what may or may not be out there. These newly released files shed no new light on any of that. They do, however, reveal a high degree of interest in the 1987 incident. In terms of Knott's revelations, the files highlight the persistent efforts and meticulous note of another person or organisations in finding out what really happened south of Mansfield in the early hours of November the 12th, 1987. According to the letters sent to the MOD, the person learned of the event in the magazine UFO Reality. The letter writer explained how he or she had my doubts after reading the article, but ignoring the report would do no good. They then wrote to the editor of UFO Reality with a few background details on their past work in ufology and expressed an interest in the Mansfield crash. Right, can I have the next slide, please? Now, this here is Thieves Wood. Now, this is the site of the first landing, or crashing, or bounce, as I described it, where the object comes down. It came down, struck the ground and lifted back off again. And this whole area here is feed forward. This is Forestry Commission land. It's regularly felled for paper crop, for timber and things like that. These are mostly coniferous trees, pines. They're planted in rows, and they have these like straight paths going through them like that. And there's little, you see there are little pathways leading off the main paths. These are what lumberjacks use, and so in little blocks. They're intended to be felled for paper crop. So I got together with a friend of mine called Dan Bostock, who is a local researcher from that area. He lives in Kirkby, and we went into Thieves Wood to try and find out what had happened. And what we did was, that's the A60 there, the main road between Nottingham and Mansfield. We went down that little pathway there to try and access the woods. There's some houses there. We knocked on a few doors, and we asked some people who were rambling. But a few people remembered the incident, but they didn't have anything really to reveal to us that we didn't already know. Then none of them could tell us where the interesting place in the wood was, where this object came down, because it came down somewhere in this wood. But they did report things like, they remember the electricity and water. The water as well, water pipes were damaged too. For about a week, both electricity and water were off for about a week. One man reported that they'd been drinking, their drinking water had come in Bowsers, which were driven in and left by the water companies, so people could just fill them up from the street, like it used to do in the 1976 drought. So, but what they did was to wash, they actually got snow and melted it to use to wash and shave and things like that with, because they were so short of water for such a long period of time. This very, very serious damage was done here. Now, we did find some patches here of felled trees. I actually had to climb over a fence to get into the enclosure where these trees were. When we got there, we found some logs lying on the ground. I counted the rings on one of the logs. It was 64 years old. So if it was a tree we assume was felled in the local area, it was one that was present at the time of this incident. Now, there was no sign of any burn damage to it, but we did find a big tall tree stump about 12 feet high, where the bark was definitely burnt off. It had definitely been subjected to fire. And so that was very interesting indeed. I made a film of it for Panmo TV, which was a little bit scrappy. It was not my best effort, but it gave the basic facts of what happened. At the end of the video, I made an appeal for any other information. If anyone in the area knew anything more, could they please get in touch with me? And someone did get in touch with me. They commented in the YouTube comments box. Someone called Nigel said to me, "Ben, you're looking in the wrong place. I know where the UFO came down. I know where it actually is. I know where the real landing site is, and I'm willing to show you." So I immediately got in touch with this person. Can I have the next slide, please? So enter Nigel Crowley. This is Nigel Crowley. He's a local man like Dan, lives in Kirkby or somewhere in that area, and he has been researching this event since the original UFO Skywatch article. He's been looking into this. He's been asking around. He's been scouring the area along with his brother. His brother didn't want to take part in the film, didn't want the publicity, but Nigel was very willing to actually come along and take part in the follow-up film I did on this event. Now, what we have here is, with Nigel, it made me think of something very important. That is the difference between official history and folk history. Now, how many of you have watched The X-Files? Put your hands up if you... Right. Actually, it's easier... How many of you haven't watched The X-Files? Yeah, I thought it's easier to ask that question, isn't it? Yeah, in this audience. There's one episode of The X-Files, I don't know what it is, but it begins with a very poignant scene with, there's like a hut or a railway car, and it's full of aliens, little grey aliens inside it, just a bare railway cart. And there's some skylights open on the roof, and there's these men standing on the roof dressed in NBC suits, like biocontainment suits. And they throw these objects into the car, and it's pretty obvious these are actually incendiary bombs, because they detonate and they fill the cart with fire, and the poor aliens run around screaming and burning. And there's a voiceover, and it's a wise old Red Indian sage, and he said, "History is something that the paleface has. But we, the red man, have learnt not to trust history because history lies. We have learned to trust memory because memory never lies. Or words to that effect. It's a very, very heart-rending scene at the beginning of an X-Files episode. I can't remember which one it was. Please let me know afterwards if you know. But that occurred to me as soon as I met Nigel, because Nigel is one of the keepers of unofficial history in his area. Now, he found that the object where it bounced, and he also found out where he learned a little bit about the military response. He said there were units already on standby, RAF Coningsby and RAF Cranwell. Now, Cranwell has now shut down. It was active during the Cold War. There's also a nuclear bunker very close by, which I'll come to in a little while. Now, the fact that there were army units and RAF units on standby indicates some form of pre-knowledge. And that we see this with the Bedouin Mountains incident, which is another very significant and similar in some ways event from January of 1974, where a large explosion was heard in northeast Wales, in the high mountains in northeast Wales, and an object actually was seen. It came to the ground, and there was a military response to this. Scott Felton, who has spoken on this stage at this conference, has spoken a lot about that, and he's researched a lot about that. It was Nigel also who told me about BBC Radio Nottingham. He said that BBC Radio Nottingham reported that a helicopter had crashed, and that the A60, the main road I showed you, had been shut because of that, and it was shut for a whole week. He reckons at least 4 days to a week. There was a cordon. There was a military cordon. There were police roadblocks around the entire area of Thieves Wood. And he said that, I mean, a crash helicopter seems strange. I mean, last year there were 3 major helicopter crashes. There was one in London, there was one in Glasgow, where a helicopter came down on top of a pub, I remember. And there was one in Norfolk where an American military helicopter crashed. There was not this response as a result of that. There was, the police put some tape around it and left a couple of bobbies to guard the wreckage. That was it. This was a dozen or more acres of land sealed off completely for a very long time, for many days. No one was allowed in, nobody went out except the military and police. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, the traffic. This is roughly where the cordon around Thieves Wood was. That there is Kirkby and Ashfield. Down here we have Ravenshead, and up that is the West Nottinghamshire College, and this here is the A60. The A60 was completely shut for about a week. This is the main road between Nottingham and Mansfield, and the traffic was actually diverted eastwards around Blydydd. Now, a lot of people will remember that because there must have been very serious traffic jams because the diversion was a much smaller road, and it must have caused a lot of congestion. That is another road that goes there along between Ravenshead and Kirkby, and then there's another road that goes up there like that. And this is that's the A60. So now we're going to talk about. I'm going to show you the actual spot where it happened. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the spot where Nigel told me the object came down in Thieves Wood. And the reason he thinks this is because of the various research he's done, which is his argument is quite persuasive, actually. This is in the wood. This is a clearing in Thieves Wood. It's roughly 300 feet by 600 feet. It's square, as you can see. It's all in blocks, as you can see there. The object came down, bounced, got back up into the air at that point, and in doing so, it caused a lot of physical damage to the area. So it must have been quite a sizable object. Don't know how big don't know what shape it was, we don't know what size it was, but it must have been a fairly hefty thing to do this kind of damage physically to the area. There was a furrow in the ground, which is still visible to this day. What's more, there was a very serious fire broke out, and the fire brigade must have called a major incident, although there's no record of one that Nigel could find. However, he knows that multiple fire engines were in the area Fire engines were deployed from as far away as Bingham, which is in the Radcliffe district, east of Nottingham, a dozen odd miles away. And he also said that some of the trees show signs of damage. For instance, their tops are bent over, which shows, close to that event, there's trees where some of the lower branches are missing and their tops are bent over, which indicates that they were subjected to fire. These are trees that are manifestly older than 1987. They grew after 1987. Now, what happened was an army unit quickly attended the scene. As soon as the fire was out, they basically sealed off the whole area, and no one was allowed in there for a week, as I said. When they were allowed in again, everything had changed. Everything was totally different. Next slide, please. This is a photo I took on the ground of the area. As you can see, there are no large trees in that area. This is Forestry Commission land. It's essentially waste ground within their land they manage. So if there are no trees growing on there, why not? Why haven't they planted trees on there? Or if they're planting trees, why are the trees not growing? There are some small bushes, there are some shrubs, there's grass. There are some small trees, but there's nothing of any size in that clearing. Now, immediately after the event, when the public were allowed access to the cordon again, what they found was that entire segment you're seeing now was cleared and was covered with sand. The government had actually removed a layer of topsoil from the ground, and they'd replaced it with sand. And I actually had a look at the sand and the soil. I actually took a little sample of the soil just to test it, so just to feel what it felt like. And there were molehills as well, and they were very, very sandy. I moved a little bit away into the actual forest, where there's normal topsoil. It's like loam, brown, flaky, the type you'd expect to see in a forest. So in that area, the soil is very different. Now, if the authorities removed topsoil, I mean, the question is, why do they do it? If they removed the entire layer of topsoil during the week when they were completely in control of that area. And it could be because they were afraid of some kind of contaminant. Some kind of toxin had been left behind by the descending object when it had struck the ground. This could be the form of some kind of bacteria, some kind of disease, virus, whatever, or something radioactive, or poison, or the chemical poison of some kind on it. Either way, this probably is what motivated them to do this. A second reason could be to actually remove any physical trace that the object had been there, if it left any loose debris behind it. This is what happened at the Brazil Ranch in Lincoln County in New Mexico in 1947, when the Roswell Incident happened. There have been recent expeditions to the location where the craft came down, and they haven't been able to find anything. It seems like everything was removed. All the loose material was removed from the site soon after it happened by the Roswell Army Air Force. So it was interesting to walk around there. There's like a furrow. It seems like the ground has a drainage problem, because there is like a drainage culvert down the middle of the ground, which could indicate that there's a problem with normal soil water absorption, which I think you get that with sand, because on the beach you get the same effect. There's like a modern drainage system at the far end of the field, because at the far end of the field it borders onto a quarry. On the Google Earth images it looks like a field, but it's actually a quarry now. So there's like a berm, and there's a drainage ditch. No, yeah, it's a strange place. It's strange to walk around and have a look around. It appears that the land is recovering. I mean, things are growing, but as I said, no big trees at all. I'll go to the next slide, please. Now, what happens after that is even more interesting. The object, for some reason, it got back into the air. Either it bounced, or it flew off, or it regained its ability to fly, and it returned to the air. It flew on for another few miles, and then it came down. This mysterious hardware that had hit the ground at Thieves Wood, it came back up again, and it flew on. And this it flew on further. We know that because it crashed, it left Thieves Wood, and it eventually came down at Annesley Hall. Now, have the next slide, please. This is the Annesley Hall estate. Now, this here is the M1 motorway. That's junction 27 of the M1 there. And there's a slip road here leading into this area here. There's an industrial estate. Now, round about there, there's a Cold War nuclear bunker, a quite big one, which was designed during the Cold War, to house emergency management and government during a nuclear attack. There was a continuity of government system. There were supplies down there. There was all kinds of different a command centre and things like that. There's Annesley Hall there. Now this is in an area called the Misk Hills, as I said, which is a beauty spot. There's lots of fine scenery. People walk around. There's forests. There's footpaths, and there's a lot of private land in the Misk Hills. But trespassing, most landowners don't make a fuss about trespassing in that area because it's so beloved of hikers and people like that. Except Annesley Hall. I'll come to that. Annesley Hall is very different. Now, Annesley Hall is a 13th century derelict stately home. It was the oldest part of the building. Is now just ruins. It's just bare walls. But it was owned by the Chaworth family, and it was owned by them for 350 years. Sir John Chaworth Muster was, perhaps appropriately, he was the sheriff of Nottingham, or one of them. There were several sheriffs of Nottingham. But it fell into disrepair. The Chaworths actually lost the house. They went bust, or they had to give it all. They lost it in a poker game or something like that. But they eventually lost the house. It was bought up by someone else in the 19th century. Now, there are several phases of construction, and one of those, like I said, none of them are in very good condition. But there is a 19th century building there, servants and guest quarters, which looks derelict when you first see it. Several of the windows are broken, but somebody is still living there. The lights go on there at night, so it has electricity, and there are people there. There's a large group of gamekeepers, a team of gamekeepers there, and I wonder what they're there for, and I'll come to that because this is important. But Nigel tried to investigate Annesley Hall. He phoned up. He tried to find out who owns it. He checked the land registry. He phoned up the land management company, which is in charge of running the estate, and they would not answer any of his questions. They put the phone down on him. So, is that because of this strange shipwreck from the sky that came down there in 1987? Because that's what I think happened. Anyway, we continued our investigation on another day. As me, Nigel, and Dan, we went up this road. There's a little pathway here called the Dog and Bear Lane, which is the closest public footpath we can get to the area of land known as the Warren. The Warren, which is where this object actually came down to rest eventually, which is in this field here. Now, as you can see on this Google Earth image, the land, the land is discoloured. There's a patch of discoloured land. This is not visible from ground level, it can only be seen from above. Now, I've been all over the area with Google Earth. I can't find any other fields for miles and miles around that have this strange discoloration on them. Very, very, very odd indeed. Could it be because this artefact, when it came to rest on the ground, it had some kind of long-lasting effect on the ground? It left behind some kind of residue. I think it's possible because the same thing happened at Roswell Forest Incident. How am I doing for time, Brian?
You're okay, yeah? No problem.
Thanks.
I'll hold that 10 minutes before you keep finished.
Thanks very much. Interestingly, maps of the area from pre-1987 do show this as the Warren. They have a label on it called the Warren. Nigel has one of these old maps, but on more modern maps, the word Warren is missing. It's not called, this area is not called the Warren anymore. Very strange, that. Can I have the next slide, please? That's Annesley Hall. And this is from the Dog and Bear Lane that we were walking up, and that's the that's a part of the building there which is in quite good condition. There's a completely ruined 13th century building behind that, and you'll see in a minute the actual 19th century modern or comparatively modern area. Okay, and the next slide, please. Now this here is the Warren. This is a view from the Dog and Bear Lane, looking kind of eastwards, sort of southeastwards at the Warren. That area there is where Nigel thinks, and what I think too, the artefact originally came to rest, where it eventually came down and stayed. Okay, next slide, please. This is one of the gamekeepers. Now this is really strange because we were walking up Dog and Bear Lane, and this car drove up. This is just outside the new area of Annesley Hall. That there is the new part of the building there. And it just parked. And the guys in there had the window up, they were watching us. And you can't know if you can see on the camera, but they were definitely watching us as we were walking down the lane. And Nigel and Dan told me the security there is very tight. In an area where security is not normally regarded as a problem. There's nothing at Annesley Hall that would interest anyone in terms of anyone to steal anything. There's not much in the way of game forests, so if these are gamekeepers, there's not an awful lot of game to protect. So if they're not after poachers, but there is a large security team there, and apparently it's actually quite difficult to get on there because the security will actually, they'll call the police if anyone actually enters that area. So next slide, please. Right, this is the actual, what I believe is this is the cordon of the area in 1987 around Annesley Hall. Now this here is the M1 motorway, and that's junction 27 there. This was not shut. And we took a little drive along the motorway just to see what we can see from the road itself of Annesley Hall. And you can't see anything because there are trees all along the sides of the motorway. Now, I'm not sure if that was the case in 1987 because since then there were new rules about tree planting. There are more trees in the country now than there were back then because there are rules about you have to plant trees at the side of main roads, you have to plant them in certain areas for carbon offsetting and things like that. So there was less forests in 1987 than there was today, and we know the M1 motorway was not shut, which means that if there was something on Annesley Hall which they didn't want people to see, it had to be invisible from the M1 one way or another. Either there were trees there in 1987 or it was hidden by some other means. You don't know exactly. But there's that little slip road there. Okay, this is, there's no road along there. That there is, what's the name of the place? Sorry. That's that little town there, whose name I've suddenly gone out of my head. What did I say? Linby. Yeah, that was all sealed off there. Thanks. And then that there is Hucknall. The actual cordon stops at the northern outskirts of Hucknall. And that there's the Mist Hills. So it was very large. Again, it was a very large area that was sealed off. Very large area indeed. Now, the thing to do obviously would be, in terms of research, we need to go much further than this. We need people who know what they're doing. For instance, I think it's dendrologists they call, people who know about trees. They can look at the trees in the area of Thieves Wood. People can sample the soil, check it for radiation, things like that. Now, that's not possible here because the area because the Annesley Hall estate security is so tight. But you can get into Thieves Wood. That's quite easy. Now, the Mansfield Incident has an awful lot. I call it the Nottinghamshire Roswell because it has a lot in common with the eponymous event in Roswell, New Mexico. We had an object of unknown origin, I think it was an unknown origin, come down, and it came to grief on the Earth's surface. The government have immediately sealed off the area. It's obvious they wanted to cover it up. Any physical evidence that was left behind, they have I don't know, they've taken away. But when it was opened a week later, there was nothing mysterious to be seen, apart from, as I said, the clearing in the woods, which was just devoid of all plant life. It was covered in sand. The soil had gone. Next slide, please. Have the one after. Thanks very much. Cheers. So, in summary, some object of unknown origin approached Nottinghamshire, West Nottinghamshire, from the northwest, flew over Mansfield, Sherwood Forest and Blytheth, came down at Thieves Wood, bounced, got up into the sky again, came down again in Annesley Hall. The government were immediately on standby. As I said, as with Berwyn Mountains, there must have been some foreknowledge. And this is an important question, because in both cases you have, they know roughly where something is about to come down, because they have their forces on standby. That happened at Berwyn Mountains as well. At Berwyn Mountains there was a massive camp had been set up at Llangollen, a few miles from Llandrillo, which is the village near where the event happened. We see the same thing here again. How the government know that, I don't know. That's a good point. But there was military helicopters in the area. The army moved in. They sealed off the area very quickly. Nothing strange was to be seen afterwards, which means that any physical evidence that actually... Is that the girl I met in the pub earlier? Tell her I'll call her back later. Now we know... So we know there was nothing strange to be seen at the event, which means it was removed. All the physical evidence was removed. It was taken. Where it is now, I don't know. It may be at Area 51 or Porton Down, which is the British equivalent of Area 51. Somewhere similar like that. Now, the sceptics will say, it's a shame Nick Pope's not here, it really is, but the sceptics always say this. They say, how come whenever you get a UFO crash, it's always in some very remote desert area or in some jungle or out in the steppes or whatever? They always say that, don't they? You never get a UFO crash in the middle of the city, do you? It's always out in some unknown place where they can easily cover it up. Why can't it be in the middle of Hyde Park where everyone will see it and they'll never cover it up? Well, there are several reasons for that. I mean, the first reason is the actual Earth itself. I mean, it's hard to appreciate living in Britain, where we're a very densely populated part of the world. There are 70 million people on this little island of ours. But most of the world's surface is uninhabited. Firstly, almost 3/4 of it is sea. Of the remaining 28-30%, which is land surface, over half of it is almost completely uninhabited by humans. It's either too cold, it's either too hot, it's too mountainous, it's too inaccessible, there are no resources, etc., etc. So really, when you're talking about built-up urban areas, you're talking about even less space. A minuscule proportion of the Earth's surface is actually a built-up urban area, which means statistically, you're always going to, it's most likely that these events will happen in a remote location somewhere. But I'd like to add that UFO crashes do happen in built-up urban areas, and this one is not the first. In a few months, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Varginha incident from Brazil, in which a strange craft came down and some aliens were seen crawling around the streets, and there was the usual cover-up and things like that. So these do, and there's good reason to think that happened. And there are similarities between, we've got 10 minutes, is it? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, thank you. There are also similarities between the Nottinghamshire Roswell and the Berwyn Mountains incident, because you have the large explosion, the bang, the shockwave. That is another feature you get here. And this explosion was not the impact of the object on the ground, because the witnesses report they saw the object come down after the explosion. So the question is, what caused the explosion? I don't know. But I mean, we see with the Nottinghamshire Roswell, as I said, the Nottingham Conurbation is a semi-urban, semi-rural location. It's big towns, there's big fields, there's farms, there's main roads. If the powers that be can cover up a UFO crash in an area like this, we've got to ask the question, is there any way they couldn't cover it up? Jeff was talking earlier on about groupthink, about how people get in the lift and they automatically adopt the same posture in the lift and the same, they're putting their hats on and things like that. That kind of, as Jeff rightly points out, that kind of behaviour is it natural? It may be natural to human psychology. It may be induced, but it's certainly encouraged by the powers that be, even if it is a natural part of our psychology. It's exacerbated, it's exaggerated through our conditioning in the schools. So it would be quite easy, even if for instance, a craft did come down in the middle of Hyde Park in London, and thousands of people saw it. Would it be really that difficult to convince most of those people with enough persuasion, enough stories in the media, enough "don't be silly" statements from people who weren't even there? How hard it would be to persuade them that they didn't really see anything strange. They just saw a balloon come down. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Now, Harry Mason, in his article in Skywatch and in Nexus, he's an Australian writer, he suggested that this was some kind of secret weapon. I'm not sure, actually. I mean, if it was some kind of secret weapon, why was it being tested in here? And this is the problem. It's hard to say. It can't be ruled out, but it seems unlikely. Unless it was one that went wrong, maybe it was some kind of experimental aircraft that went off course, which would explain the military response. Maybe the speedy military response. They may have been they may have been there for safety. They may have deployed some of their troops forward as a matter of safety because they were testing this experimental aircraft. It wasn't. I don't think it was a bolide meteor or bolide meteor, as Andy Roberts calls them. It wasn't anything like that. It was something strange. Another possibility, it was not a weapon from the British arsenal, but it was actually from the Cold War enemy, the Soviet Union. Do you think the Soviet Union were actually testing or a weapon or even attacking us with some kind of unknown weapon that we are not aware of? That is very unlikely regarding the political situation at the time, because at the time, in 1987, Mikhail Gorbachev was president of the Soviet Union, and he was transforming that country. He had glasnost and perestroika. He wanted to change the Soviet Union into a completely new form where it was more open and restructured, as he called it, and open with the rest of the world. He wanted essentially to end the Cold War, which he succeeded in doing. It destroyed the Soviet Union in the end, and 5 years later, in December of 1991, the actual country was disbanded and the new Russia took place. But it seems unlikely, as part of his glasnost and perestroika policy, he would actually fire some esoteric weapon at the United Kingdom. Especially since he was very good friends with Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister at the time. In fact, he attended her funeral a couple of years ago. Could it be extraterrestrial? I mean, I think it could be. I mean, there's a Right Honourable Paul Hellyer MP saying UFOs are as real as the aircraft that fly above our heads. How long now, Brian? 5 minutes. They're as real as the aircraft that fly above our heads. So, and there's the Disclosure Project, witnesses you hear about, there's all the whistleblowers coming forward, the citizen hearing. It is good. There is something up there which is real. And why shouldn't this be a part of that? I mean, as I said, more research needs to be done. Maybe someone who knows what they're doing with Geiger counters could check for radiation at the Thieves Wood site, the soil, get people to test the soil. But Peter Robbins, I've been in touch with Peter Robbins about this, and he has done a similar experiment at Capel Green, which is the big field by Rendlesham Forest where an object came down in 1980. It was seen by Larry Warren and several other people. He has tested the soil from that field, and he has found that there is indeed some kind of contamination of one kind or another. The presence of this artefact from another world has affected the surroundings in some way, and it's possible we'll see exactly the same here, which is why maybe the government removed the topsoil from Thieves Wood. We're not sure anyway. It depends. And I also appeal, of course, for any witnesses or whistleblowers connected to this event to please contact me. Anything you say to me will be held in the strictest of confidence, but if you know anything about this, if you were in the area at the time, in whatever capacity, and you have some information I have not given you tonight, then could you let me know? I'd really appreciate it. We have to look at it logically. I mean, the sceptics love logic. They misuse logic. They fool themselves into thinking they're being logical when they're actually being very doctrinaire. But you have to rule it out. As Sherlock Holmes said, if it's not a weapon, and it's not an aircraft, and it's not a bowline meteor, then what is it? Could it be an extraterrestrial craft? And to quote Nick Pope again, we can't rule it out. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. All right, yeah, sure. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, at the back. Lady at the back.
Hi, Ben.
Hello, Sarah.
We're talking about mountains, and maybe yesterday I showed you two of my photographs where from that area, right in the mountains, really, not far away, where the caravan is. What's going on there in Manchester at the moment is a couple of things. A lot of the villagers who live in Manchester, they've got cancer.
Cancer?
Cancer.
Right.
And there's a heck of a lot of land of cancer for this small village. Not only have the village got it, but so have the cows and sheep. So that's a bit strange. Secondly, at the back of the river, where you would walk up the mountain, you've got to walk up to where it is and it is. Now we've been able to do that for the past 20 years, and it was only last year when my niece walked with her husband. Normally he used to climb over one of the gates, walk through this massive field, and then he would be in the area where the UFO went down. Now there's a man sitting in a hut all day long, and you can't get over that fence. And he popped up the hut and said, no, you're not allowing him. And we've been going there for 20 years, so there's something going on there.
Yeah.
There is an energy that people who recognise energy, and at Easter last year, a massive mothership came in. Some people got those out, I haven't got them yet, but they do get them when they happen. But a massive mothership came in on this Friday, 2014, right over that area. And it stayed there on Good Friday for a whole hour, and then Easter Saturday came back, and everybody in the village saw it. So there's more activity, I think, going on in the village.
Yeah, thank you very much for that information. I hadn't heard about that. I didn't know about the cancer hotspot and so the area where the object came down is still, the government is still interested in it. They're still keeping an eye on it.
Well, when we asked the man in the box, why can't we go in? He said, it's my land, and it's what we've been doing here for 20 years. And I can't show you, because you're in the middle of the Bergen Mountains, you're in the forest, and there's nothing there, there's no facilities, but he's sitting in a shed.
Right.
And he came out from nowhere, and he said, what are you doing? And they were about to climb over the fence, and they can't go through here to climb up now. So where that happened, I don't know.
Oh, well, thanks for the information. That's interesting. Thanks very much. Has anyone else got a question? How much time we got?
A couple of questions, you're all right.
Okay, cheers. Okay.
Hi Ben.
Hello.
What fascinates me is how this supposed UFO, and obviously from what you say, can be quite big. Am I right?
It's quite big.
Yeah. What fascinates me is how they get an object, presumably intact, away from there without people seeing it.
Exactly, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know what state the actual object was in when it came down at Annesley Hall. Presumably most of it got back up into the air after the Thieves Wood site. It hit the Thieves Wood site. When it landed at Annesley Hall, we don't know what state it was in. But if it was some considerable size, I mean, you can... Manoeuvring on the roads would be very difficult. It may be possible to move it out by aircraft of some kind. I'm not sure about that. That's an interesting idea about how they actually got out the evidence that was there. Yeah.
Okay, and also, do you think the topsoil might be inside of the hall?
Might be inside what?
The hall, the nearby hall.
Oh, yeah. Well,
that's why it's, been cut off.
if they needed a place to store it, and there was no one, it's possible something they put it there. I don't know. As far as the Warren is concerned, I mean, there's no sign that any soil has been removed from the Warren site, apart from that discoloration of the ground. But as far as the Thieves' Wood was topsoil, where they moved it, I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It's definitely must be on the lock and key somewhere. I mean, whether it's in Annesley Hall, I don't know. I mean, I imagine the security would be much tighter if it was at Annesley Hall. It's maybe at Porton Down or somewhere like that.
Okay, it's just thoughts.
Thanks very much. We've got time for one more. It's a gentleman. Oh,
you talk about open spaces and batteries and UFOs. They do have in urban areas.
I'm going to come a bit closer. One moment.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? They do have in urban areas. 3 occasions in my life, in the last 5 years, of experiencing UFOs. Well, last instance, 31st of October last year, I live in a flat, on the flight path between an airport, planes come past my flat and the news. And I'm watching there, and I'm going down. So the next one comes in 4 minutes. This one comes, rather come from the south, as it descends in the bung, going across the flight path. I was coming over my mate's flat, and I'm glad to know what's that orange patch on the carpet, straight on my head. I really to come back and here. I've got my phone out, it come past me 3 times, I've got all the pictures and 2 aliens looking out and down. It's in the FSI magazine. It looked like me. He kept saying to me, is there water or river or place in the rivers? But FSI magazine, I kept saying, no, there's no rivers, no water. And then he said to me, think carefully, is there any water around them? And I said, no, I'm positive there aren't. A water's out in the barrier. 2 minutes later, my flat's in water's out. We should say that, because it's down. He said, that's where the mulch was. The graph you saw was a scout. And this thing flew, no sound, perfect orange. I got 18 cents on it, which was silver, it's in the FSI magazine now. But that thing come from a water out direction. And guess what? They put a load of houses where the water tables, and then the structures are about 3 months older. And I found that weird. They put all bloody houses on top of the water table, all the cell phone and satellite issues for the pipelines. So those people living in London can get EMS in every day, and Richards and Trinidad and the Wood Trade. They build houses right under the water.
And that was my lecture at Probe, Lytham St Anne's, Lancashire, that great conference at the YMCA Centre. And I loved every minute of it. Now, some of you are going to be asking me, come on Ben, what about UFO Disclosure 2015? It's almost December. I've been making this series of films. I think I've done about 12 or 14 hours of these films over the course of the year, covering the disclosure process of 2015. Yes, well, okay, 2015 is not over yet. I am still in touch with Steve Bassett. He's given me, he's sending me updates on what he's up to. and I will be making at least one more film in this series before New Year's Eve. Okay, and at least one more film in that series, UFO Disclosure 2015. I thought about actually including this live lecture as a part of my UFO Disclosure 2015 film, but I decided not to. I thought this should be a dedicated video on its own, because it is something I think specific and not necessarily related to UFO Disclosure 2015. The Nottinghamshire Roswell is something independent, I think. But well, what is going to happen? Are we going to have disclosure? Are we heading for a point where we could get disclosure within the next 4 weeks? I don't know. It's looking increasingly unlikely, isn't it? So it's sad if that's the case. Well, that's a shame. But I'm not going to commiserate yet. Okay, I've got my bottle of Disclosure champagne under my bed, and who knows, I might be opening it along with my Christmas sherry and my mince pies. So stay tuned for that. That might be the next video upload, or maybe the one after, or the one after that. I'm not sure, but that's coming soon. Thanks for watching. Hospital Reporters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.